Okay, good afternoon. Today we're going to continue kind of with our lecture from the other day. But one of the things I want to keep it a little bit shorter. And also, we're going to talk specifically about something that is very important that we mentioned last time, which was the interactions between organ systems. What I really want to focus on today briefly is the interaction between the circulatory system, especially, and the respiratory system. Very important that you kind of get the concepts down. And so we're going to that's what we're going to look at today. Okay. Share. Okay, so like I said, today we're going to look at uh, basically the interactions between the circulatory system and the respiratory system. They go hand in hand. But just to kind of review, uh, I think we said it last time. The main purpose of the circulatory system is to carry oxygenated blood to the tissues, and also the blood filters out some of the waste and to be excreted from the body. Okay, the major player in the circulatory system, I think we touched on it last time, is the heart. Okay, it's a hollow organ. It is a muscle. Okay, and the heart can never rest. Okay, and it pumps blood throughout the body. Okay, this is just something that I mean you need to know as you go further in science, especially if you take AP biology or want to study science after high school. You will definitely have to know and be able to trace the flow of blood through the heart. But uh, just kind of in basic terms, you have a large vein that's about as big around it as diameter as a quarter, called the vena cava, and there's a part that comes from your upper torso, and the part that comes from your lower torso. The upper torso is the superior vena cava, and the lower torso is the inferior vena cava. Well, both of these veins come together in the right atrium. Okay. And you see where you see blue, that's, like I said, we talked about that last time, but the blue is for deoxygenated blood. And in fact, the superior and inferior vena cava meet together, and they basically dump the deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. Between the right atrium and right ventricle is what's called a tricuspid valve. And so due to pressure differentials, which we won't go into right now, that occur, but the tricuspid valves open up and shunts the blood from the right atrium into the right ventricle. Into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it goes into the lungs by way of the pulmonary vein, and goes into the lungs and is oxygenated, and it goes back into the left atrium of the heart, which is right here, by way of the pulmonary artery. Now, in the left atria, they have, instead of having a tricuspid valve, and let me backtrack a little bit. All cusp means is a number of flaps. So between the right atria and the right ventricle, the valve there has 3 flaps. And between the left ventricle and the atrium and left ventricle, it has 2 flaps. So it's called a mitral valve. Okay. And that mitral valve opens up and shunts blood into the left ventricle. Now, if you notice, the walls on the lower half of the heart are way thicker than the walls on the upper half of the heart, and that's the reason, because these are the pump stations. But this left the wall of the left ventricle is significantly thick because it's got to pump blood through the aorta and all around the body. Okay, so a very thick wall, and that's what happens. The left ventricle pumps blood through the aorta and then all throughout the body. Okay, all throughout the body. So that's kind of in a rough manner, that's kind of the basic flow of blood through the heart. Okay, and it's just something you should know because it's part of the heartbeat. And then one of the big things is that when the doctor's listening, has a stethoscope, excuse me, and is listening to your heart, one of the things he's listening to is the opening and closing of this valve right here. Because when you get a heart murmur, it's the mitral valve that's between the left ventricle and the left atrium. This valve right here is what a heart murmur where heart murmur happens. Okay, and like I said, it's just when the flaps pucker for whatever reason. Normally it could be due to strep throat or something like that. What'll happen is a little tiny amount of blood will kind of squirt back through, and that's what the doctor's listening for. It makes a little squeaking sound, and some heart murmurs clear up. Sometimes, worst case scenario, they have to go in there and fix it, and it's almost become routine. I mean, it's not 100%, but I mean, it's pretty much routine how they can just go in there and fix the valve, and people can live a normal life. Okay, these are the blood vessels. The major players between the interaction between the circulatory system and the respiratory system are really the capillaries and the arteries and the veins, but specifically the gas exchange. And that's why I wanted to go back through this and emphasize this. The gas exchange takes place in the capillaries, and these are like microscopic. Okay, these are microscopic, and it's where the oxygen atoms, the CO2 actually dissolves from the blood, from the capillaries back into the lungs, and you breathe it out. And then the oxygen actually dissolves across the membranes of the capillaries, and it's picked up by the red blood cells. Okay, so that's pretty. Those are like I said, the major players. In arteries, with the exception of one. Arteries typically take blood away from the heart, okay, and veins take blood to the heart, with the exception of one. And they basically are denoted when you see them in charts and pictures like this, because the deoxygenated blood is not bright red. Matter of fact, if somebody severs an artery, the blood that comes out, you can immediately, especially a trained eye like a doctor, can immediately tell that it's artery blood as opposed to blood from a vein or something like that. Okay, flow of blood through the body. We kind of basically, when the left ventricle pumps it, goes through the aorta. Okay, and basically there's a split. The blood goes all the way up to the brain and back through the superior vena cava. Then the blood goes down to the legs, back up into the heart through the inferior vena cava. Okay, now in terms of learning blood flow, where the fun really begins is when you got to talk about like a mother carrying a baby, because the blood's got to flow through the mom, and it has to flow through the baby and go back. And that's when you find out that, while the baby's is growing inside the mom, because they're not using their lungs, there's actually two holes in the baby's heart. We'll talk about that a little later. Okay, blood is interesting because people have what they've come up with recently, that people are looking at blood as almost another organ, basically, because of its function. Blood has several parts. It has plasma, which is the liquid part. It actually has red blood cells, and these actually, I mentioned the other day, the red blood cells have hundreds of hemoglobin molecules on each red blood cell, and the heme group is what has iron in it, and it's that iron that actually takes up oxygen, one oxygen atom at a time. Okay, that's why it's so important that you have enough iron in your diet, because if not, I mean, that's what the term anemia is, but it can actually affect your ability to get oxygenated blood to your extremities. And one of the characteristics of somebody who is anemic is, like, if you feel their hands, oxygenated blood flowing to where it's supposed to makes the, like, your hands will be nice and warm. But if a person with anemia, they're not getting that good total saturation with oxygen, their hands will be typically, and their extremities will be cold. White blood cells, it's the body's disease fighters. They're both good and bad. Okay. So the immune response, when something is known to be is found to be foreign in the body, it's attacked by white blood cells. They're like the infantry soldiers, the frontline troops that go in and deal with it. Now, when the problem is when the allergic response happens, like in an asthma attack, it can work counter the body, because if them being attacked by eosinophils, like in the lungs, causes swelling, and it causes the little small microtubules to close off, and a person, like, starts suffocating. They can't breathe until they take some an inhaler that's got medicine in there to make the passageways open up. Platelets, like, platelets are good, and platelets can cause issues. The platelets are the clotting agents, okay, that make that make the blood clot. There's actually two proteins involved with it, called fibrin and fibrinogen. And these things are secreted, and they can actually cause clot. Now, when you get cut, or you get a big gash, or even if somebody is in an armed conflict or a war and gets shot, then yes, the platelets do their job, and boom, clot, because you want to clot. As a matter of fact, they've in the laboratory, they've come up with something that's similar to the clotting agents called quick clot, and they made it synthetically, and it's in all the soldiers have it in their pocket. So if you get shot, you can just dump it in the wound, and it'll clot it up, saving a lot of people's lives. On the downside of clotting, what happens is, when there's a buildup of plaque in your veins and arteries, it can cause the inner lining of the veins or arteries to rupture. And when it ruptures, the body reacts to it just like if you got a cut or something like that, and it'll release the clotting agents, and that's how people get the bad blood clots, where in your coronary artery or whatever. That's how you get the bad blood clot, which can block an artery off and cause problems, heart attack, and tragic conditions. Okay, now the second half of what we're talking about in terms of the interactions of body systems, we're talking about the circulatory system first. The other part of that really interacts with it is the respiratory system. Okay, and this is kind of a cascade. Your respiratory system takes the oxygen in, and the circulatory system kind of moves the oxygen around the body. And then we will look at the digestive system later, but you should already be kind of focused in on, we talked about glucose, and how glucose is broken down to generate energy for the cell through cell respiration. Well, the way it gets the glucose is from that digestive system. All right, the function, like I said, the respiratory system moves oxygen from the outside environment. It also moves carbon dioxide, or removes it, and water from the body too. Another thing that I found out is fascinating is that some of it, like people are conscious about like how they lose weight. Some of your weight loss is from breathing out. They found, I guess it's the Martian, but some of that is from exhaling and stuff like that, believe it or not. All right, major players. just like in the kind of the same team that was in the circulatory system, arteries, capillaries, and veins. Because it's the respiratory system, when you breathe in, it needs the arteries, capillaries, and veins. It needs those to transport the blood, both for oxygenating the body and also getting rid of waste. Okay. And here's kind of the path of air into the body. It kind of goes from the outside through the nose, the pharynx, down the trachea. And like I said, if you, this little notch at the bottom of your neck, there's a notch there. If you press in, not too hard, you can actually feel your trachea. It goes through the pharynx, the larynx, trachea, into the lungs. Where the lungs, the trachea branches off, those are the bronchi. And then as you continue to go into the lungs, the tubes get smaller and smaller, bronchial tubes, and finally you break into where you have the actual alveoli sacs. Now, one of the interesting things, the way to look at an alveoli, the little bitty microscopic air sacs, is to look at it like a balloon, because that's basically where it is, filled up with air. One of the interesting parts, though, is, if the balloon gets moisture in it, it'll collapse on itself, okay? So, and you can actually try this, but if you take a balloon and you put a soapy substance in there, okay, like a little bit of soapy water, and let it coat the sides, then it won't collapse on itself. And there's actually a substance that's inside the little alveolar sacs called a surfactant, which is kind of like similar to soap, and it actually keeps the alveoli sacs from collapsing in on themselves. You leave it or not? Okay, this will kind of want to get into briefly the actual mechanics of how you breathe in and out. For inhale, it has to do with air pressure. Okay, it has to do with air pressure. So when you're going to breathe in, the air cavity has to expand. So the diaphragm will go down and increase the size of your chest cavity. Okay, when it increases the size of your chest cavity, the air pressure inside your lungs, because the chest cavity has been expanded, it goes down. It goes down to being lower. The air pressure inside your lungs, when the diaphragm goes down and expands the chest cavity, the air pressure is lower than it is on outside. Okay, so when the air pressure on the inside of your lungs is less than the air pressure on the outside, then the air will flow in, all in the space that you're going. Okay, it's all, believe it or not, it's all about pressure differential. Conversely, on exhalation, the diaphragm moves up and the intercostal muscles in the ribs compact in, okay, making your chest cavity smaller, and thereby increasing the air pressure inside the lungs, or inside the chest cavity. When that happens, when the pressure inside the lungs, because of the diaphragm moving in and the space being made smaller, when the pressure inside of your lungs becomes greater than the air pressure outside, then air goes out. Okay, and all this takes place in the space of going, and you can feel all of it happening. So that's kind of the mechanics of breathing. It's about air pressure. And we may talk a little bit more about that. That's why there's certain things that can happen if the little minute air pressure that exists inside between the space between, like, the ribs and your lungs. If that air pressure gets changed, you can have things like, for example, in the case of something foreign, like piercing the chest cavity, okay, like someone stabbed in the chest, or if a bullet enters the chest, it changes that the air pressure to the point where that's what causes the lung to collapse. They call it a pneumothorax. Okay, not to get too down into the nitty-gritty details, but I just wanted to share that with you. All right, here's kind of structure of the lungs. And Your right lung has three lobes, and your left lung only has two because it's got what in there? It's got the heart. Okay, if you look at like the shape of it, it's funny how that works out, but that's true. One of the cool things about your lungs is they can regenerate themselves. So people who smoke for years and years and years and finally quit in a certain, like if somebody smoked for 20 years, I don't know exactly how long, but in a space of a certain amount of time, they lungs can regenerate. Now, one of the things that's interesting, I have to do more research about COVID-19, is that even after the people get rid of it, some of them, for whatever reason, have serious issues with their lungs, long lasting issues with their lungs that they have to get. Some people even have to get like lung transplant. At this point, I'm gonna have to do the research to understand that. But in brief, these are the like, because the circulatory system and the respiratory system are two of the main systems in the body, because they definitely deal with oxygenation and also the bloodstream. You have glucose in your bloodstream too, so basically the nourishment of your body and your body tissues is happens based on the circulatory system. This is a kind of a visual of what I was talking about, the gas exchange between the lungs and the blood. And like I said, it happens at the capillary level, the microscopic level, and the O2 is picked up by the red blood cells, specifically the hemoglobin molecules on the red blood cells pick up the oxygen, one oxygen atom, like at the atomic level, and then CO2 dissolves from the bloodstream through the capillary wall into the alveoli, and then out the body when you breathe out. Okay, so that's basically pretty much all I wanted to say about uh, these two particular systems, and basically showing how they work together. And if you want to, kind of on your own, you can just kind of write down how you think the two systems work and interacting with each other, and then their specific functions. And we're going to stop right